Hello, my name is Ian Bobinek, and this is my first official a stream of finding character. So I have never done a personal stream like this before, so this is definitely a new area for me to jump into. I'm not sure who's all jumping on. I've invited some students of mine to come watch as I kind of run this test. Uh, Otherwise, I am hoping to do a little drawing today to kind of, work on my skills because I feel like I've let drawing kind of slide a lot over the years. I had undiagnosed ADHD for many years, and that caused me to kind of focus on some areas that weren't really where I wanted to focus on. And so many years I let my abilities in drawing atrophy. And now in my later years, I am hoping to kind of jump a little more into that and try to see what I can do to still get better. Um, and through that, I might talk a little about my journey and kind of thoughts I have on art, as well as kind of things I like to focus on art, especially coming at it from an animation perspective. Yeah. So I'm hoping to kind of jump in here, trying some new systems here. It's definitely new for me, so hopefully it's not too clunky and you guys can follow along with me here. So I've kind of got things set up so that way we could see me drawing on my digital pen tablet here. I have it set up so that way you'll be able to see on the screen easily what I draw. I use a certain program on my PC called Adobe Fresco. I like that it kind of gives a nice sketchy line here to incorporate. And I might just start with some startups sketches here to kind of get warmed up. I always like to do a nice warm up here. And if we do have anyone jump on that wants to chat, we can take a look here. Let's kind of bring up my setup. We got a couple of people kind of jumped in with the chat there. All right. Yeah, looking pretty good. So, something I always love to start drawing with when I'm trying to get into the drawing mood is drawing just spheres and then starting to dissect them so that way you're kind of thinking about things three-dimensionally. I also like to just draw kind of almost like squiggle shapes, and those I like to then try to define in 3D. And I'll kind of show you what I want or what I mean here. So not only just coming in here and drawing some spheres. Now, obviously, that's not the very best circle that you can put on there, but, you just got to go slow and try your best to create a nice looking circle there. It's not perfect, but as you go, just start to kind of put in there. Be deliberate about the circles that you're putting in there. That one's a little bit better. Have a little bit of a flat area right there, but that's fine. And as you kind of grow into it, then you're going to start to feel yourself putting in better circles. Now, some people think that, if I go super fast, maybe I'll do it really good, but to be honest, when you do super fast circles, while your line quality might be a little bit nicer, you're gonna not have a very good circle. So I rather a circle be a little jittery but have the form that we want. So just take your time coming in here and just making a nice circle. And make quite a few just to start putting them around the page, different sizes, different positions. And then as you come through here, we're going to start to kind of dissect them to kind of show that 3D nature here. Sometimes I'll do 2, maybe 3, kind of show like an orientation. So let's get a little bit of a flatness there, but even this eggy one here, we'll kind of come in here, try to dissect. Trying to think about it in 3D space. Yeah, something like that. Come through and like to do this to kind of warm up here. Another thing, though, I like to do, I'm going to just kind of make a new layer real quick here. Like I said, is I kind of like to just make a squiggly shape. And I like to take a look at that and think, okay, how can I render this in a 3D way? How can I make this look like it exists more than just like a flat shape, but that it has form and volume? And again, this is just a warm-up exercise. But I'll try to think about what parts of it are sticking up and what's the actual curvature of things here. And I'm going to put on it what are known, at least in animation, as surface lines. And that'll help define this form in 3D. So thinking about this, I'm going to have this kind of part right here kind of have a little bit of a bump. And there's going to be a valley here, and then it's going to come back up and bump here. So just thinking about it a little, have like a knob right here as well. So I'm going to come in here and start putting in some surface lines, like so. Kind of drawing around the object, trying to think about it in 3D space. And like here, I said this is kind of be kind of bumped up here. Like so. Yeah, something like that. Sometimes I'll put an intersecting kind of line here to help show even more detail in there. But already it's starting to have kind of like a 3D form. These surface lines help to define it in space, so that way you start to see maybe what it would be if it was an actual 3D object. So I like to do quite a few of these just to get started. Let's do something a little bit more weird. Think about how I want this to look. Let's do something kind of flat here. Something like that. See something maybe a little more bulbous. Sometimes I also like to think about if there's anything that could be existing inside here in the so if there was like almost something that could stick out right here a little bit more. I won't do it on this one though. Why I like to do this as a warm-up again is just it starts to get you thinking about things in a three-dimensional way. And while you can draw a little more graphically, it is nice to understand how to render things in sort of like a more three-dimensional way, because then you can actually really improve what you do graphically in a more flat 2D way. So here on my sketch pad, I got a few different drawings here. I might go through and do a couple more circles. And usually as I start doing this, I start working into actually drawing some things as I'm doing all these warm-ups. Like that. Some of these spheres will often start to turn into faces. I'll start to put different features on them, mouths, nose, eyes, and then it starts to morph into making character, because that is something that I'm all about, is characters. So why don't we kind of start jumping into that? I'll start thinking about doing my first character here. I'm going to focus on just like a face at the moment. So we'll start with that circle. Ha! Thank you. Yes, I tried to really think about this setup and how I wanted it to be. This is still this texture here, and I have it to where, thankfully, we can kind of do a nice blending mode. So as I draw, it looks like I'm drawing right on the sketchbook, so that's really nice. And the transition does work really good to kind of zoom in on that and kind of put things together. I did like how that came out. So I'm going to start with one of my spheres here, and I'm going to think about, okay, you know, what direction do I want maybe this character looking off to? So I'm going to come in here and do a circle, maybe a little bit better circle than that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, something like that. I'm going to have them kind of looking off in this direction, and maybe just slightly up. Something like that. Now, I know there's many different methods out there for drawing character heads, like things like the Loomis method and the triangle method, and everyone is going to have kind of different. They usually take what they're taught and then start to adapt it to something that's a little bit more that works for them. The Loomis method kind of takes a circle like this, and they kind of lop off the sides, almost like a chestnut. So that way, if you have like the sphere kind of arcing like this up front, and then it just kind of cuts back. There's also kind of a method where you can you take a sphere, and as you're putting in kind of like the triangle of the chin here, kind of where the eyes, that kind of the brow to the cheek is sort of like almost this notch. If you think of ever seen the for a pipe organ, the pipes that have the little notch taken out of it in a pipe. So if I take it right, kind of right here, they usually have kind of like this little notch kind of just taken out of it for a pipe of a pipe organ. Well, that same kind of idea of a notch is what you would put on the face for kind of like that, the eye sockets of that. So if you find kind of like the middle line and you're thinking about kind of where the edge here is, and you kind of bring in that notch, that can give you a really good starting point for where you're going to put stuff, obviously. All right, well, let's get rid of some of this excess I did on here now. All right, so we kind of got something going on here. I always kind of do a dissect of the sphere, but I always kind of feel like that's more like where your eyebrows are going to go for your characters. So something like right that. Put in kind of like a nose. Thinking what kind of nose I want them to have. What kind of mouth. Usually my first couple ones that I start going in here, I leave kind of all my guidelines, as you can see here. It's very messy. We've got all the kind of inner lines here of my sphere and intersecting guides for figuring out where things kind of go. I'll kind of leave them in there as I'm just kind of getting back into drawing, especially if I haven't done it in a little while. Something like that. So kind of feel like the nose is a little big on that, but yeah. So that's a good first run. So let me try going at it again now that I'm kind of working out some of the kinks. Let's do another face. Something I'd like to do is start bringing in some reference material to start looking at, to pick apart and start thinking about how maybe to look at it and start thinking about bringing character out of that for something a little bit more characterized or caricatured. That is something that I tend to do. While I enjoy doing things that are more realistic, I used to do some charcoal drawings that were almost photorealistic. Those were always fun to do, but something I love to do is to bring out the essence of a character in a caricature. Something about it just can have so much vitality and energy, and I really, really enjoy doing more caricature things and kind of pulling out the design and doing exaggeration in certain areas. All right, so let's try, let me start again. This time maybe I'll be a little bit lighter on the extra stuff here. I might just do some basic things in here. Thinking about maybe making this character have a bit more of an expression, something a little more something that I tend to really struggle with when doing character art is the relationship of the eyebrows to the face. Especially usually my first iterations are always a little off. And the nice thing about, of course, digital tools is you can kind of come in here and move things around. So I had the kind of face a little too squinched in there. Something I've had really fun with lately is trying to figure out different ways to draw ears. You know, you think about, well, you know, ears are ears, but there's so many different ways to draw ears, and I always find it kind of fun to think about new ways of drawing ears. Um, One of the simplest ways that I've seen, I like to watch a cartoon show called Ed, Ed and Eddie, and their ears are so simple. They're basically almost like a kind of this little pucker out, something like this, almost like an edge of a horn, and then you just got an X there. That's their ear. So that's an interesting rendering of that. As we thought about in the beginning, or as I did my warm-ups with thinking about things in 3 dimensions, that's always helpful, especially if we're thinking about things, because an ear can be something simple or it can be complex, because it does have quite a few angles to it when you think about it. For like ears, they kind of have these ridges on them. And everyone's ears, of course, are different too, so you might display them differently, but you have kind of this pocket that they make, as well as the little, like that, and they kind of curl back. You also have these innards here, and it's interesting to figure out how to render those. I've seen some where they kind of almost bring kind of like this, something like that in there. It's almost like they make a little Y too, so if I think about it like that, it's almost like a, yeah, not like that, but something like that. Maybe I'd want to get it a little closer to the edge here. Yeah. So yeah, depending, some have this where it sticks out more in the middle here. And then kind of comes back in, something like that. Of course, you could make kind of the elf ear if you wanted. But ears can be fun. All right, come back to this character I was working on here. One thing that does help me with eyebrows to think about is that kind of this point in the eyebrow often happens where you have a spot on your forehead where it kind of starts to recede. So you've got this flat part of your forehead here that faces directly out, but your forehead then starts to angle outwards in this direction at a certain point. And so to think about where that transition part is, that's usually where this little arch is in your eyebrow, because it's not only arching down, but it's also wrapping around the side of your head. So you almost have to come in here and think about it as that on this kind of circle, it kind of has this kind of definition. There's also another one right here, thinking about that Loomis method, where it's kind of like a flat side that's more pointing out. Then you have this kind of 45-degree angle. Oh my goodness, that's kind of more pointing in this direction. And then we have this one that's pointing more this direction. So kind of thinking about how the head kind of fits in 3D space. The top of the head will almost reflect that too, because you're going to have this part here, and then as this kind of arches back, that's where you're going to have an angle there, as well as the head's going to have this kind of bulge here. But some of these lines, while it's good to put, especially when you're trying to learn, it's great to put those in there. Sometimes, you know, you don't always need them, especially once you get really used to doing it. Then you don't have to put in some of those invisible lines. They kind of just become second nature to you. So we kind of, you know, got that center line there. So, if you wanted to give like a character almost like a widow's peak, or that's where the center part would be in their hair. So like if we had this one kind of, have this kind of have like more of a looser, messier quality to it. So if they had a braid, it could take more time to render that out. Yes. Yes. So, interestingly enough, someone in the chat just said it's crazy how much hair changes a character when they're bald. Yeah, and if you ever think about that, if your friends are do anything crazy with their hair, it can change how they are received a lot. So I definitely agree that hair can change a character a lot. So even if like I kind of gave this kind of messy, kind of pulled back into a braid type look, but if we kind of back that up and kind of undid that, we could make this look different. Like it could be sportier. So we could come in here, going back to this kind of balder look, which I'm going to take away the head for a moment. And yeah, if we kind of gave it more like a sportier look, so something that's a little bit more something more like that. One hairstyle that I like to do, only just because it's fun, and I like to do fan art as well, and that is kind of the Katara, which it's been a little while since I did that, but usually it's kind of like comes off like that, if I remember. Not that far off. Kind of comes around. She has these little kind of like that, and then yeah, she's got that kind of braid. Yeah, we'll just keep it as a group for now. Yeah, I think it comes a little bit more. It's not so separated up there. Now, something that I do a lot is I do keep my sketchiness pretty sketchy, especially when I'm just like getting started off. And it doesn't always look the prettiest when you do it that way. I think that she also has a little part right there. Now, that's not the right facial features for like a Katara, but we're getting closer to like what the hairstyle would be. I think she had something come off here too, but maybe just a little. Why I don't mind being so sketchy is because there is a benefit to being really loose when you're drawing. Now, if I ever have any artists friends who do a lot of drawing, probably a lot more drawing than I do, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is old hat, and you're not telling me anything different." But I'm just kind of talking out my thoughts as I draw, and some of the things that I'm working on, in hopes of that if someone's like, "Oh, hey, you know what? I heard you say this, but here's something else you can think about while you're doing that." And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people to kind of come along with this journey if they see things because my whole goal is to just improve my drawing. But while this is very messy, I keep it messy on purpose because when you keep it really fluid and messy like that, it helps with new ideas generating. If you start to lock it down and really get more fine-tuned and start polishing it up too quickly, well, then you lose out and you might get stuck with an area that is not quite right, or stuck with an idea that is also just a little lackluster. So keeping a little more rough in the beginning is great for generating new ideas and making sure that it is exactly the way you want it before you spend a ton of time starting to really fine-tune it. So yeah, well, let's do one more, and then I think that will be a good run for today. One thing I noticed here, and I'll have to adjust that, is because I've got this where we can see the chat, but it looks like it's kind of cropped off there a little bit on the bottom, so we're not able to see some of the people that have jumped on there and said a few things, like how they mentioned how it looks like drawing. I'm drawing on paper, and also that the hair changes the character, so I'll have to fix that. But let's jump back into this. All right, let's do one more. I'll try to keep it loose, but maybe not as sketchy. Let's see here. I tend to like drawing characters looking in this direction. They're artists. They are. I've seen memes online where they talk about, what kind of artist are you? Artist that has your characters look this way or this way, and it's very true. People have preferences, and my preference, I think, it tends to be that my characters are looking rightward, and maybe that has to do with that. I also am a video editor. I think a lot about film and storyboarding, and kind of a dynamic in storyboarding is that you always have your characters kind of move, not always, but general rules, you have your characters move left to right visually in different shots, and that kind of signifies that your characters are moving forward in the story, rather than, if they're moving in the opposite direction, they're moving backwards or against the progress towards their story. And you might be like, well, who arbitrarily made that up? Well, a lot of that has to do with just Western reading, because we read left to right. So as we progress through a story, we automatically travel left to right. So in that way, we also want to see a left to right movement visually, and that tells us that things are progressing in the direction they need to go. So kind of in that way, then, I think I'm thinking about characters looking off in these directions. Be a little sketchy here. Do a little bit fewer guidelines. Let's make that be a little less angry. Noses are something fun that can be really hard to do. One thing I like to do with noses is try to get some other guidelines in there to help define them. Obviously, a nose has basically this main ball on the front. We've got the nostrils that kind of come off the bottom, and then you have these other two kind of edge bulges off from that main ball that make the nostrils here, something like that. And then this, of course, tapers back to go into the bridge of the nose here. And then you can kind of define things like an upturned nose or more downturned nose, or how bulbous this front can be, depending on almost like a transition point of where it kind of changes from being top and bottom. So like, there's usually like a certain part of the nostril that curls under. So I might do something like that and then have it kind of come up here. So kind of that already makes a lot of definition on the nose here. So here's more like the sides of the nose. And this is a lot more lines than I probably would put on for a more simplistic nose. But already we're defining a lot more about the nose in what we're trying to see here in terms of the nostrils and what's considered top, what's considered bottom. It just makes it a little bit more appealing to see. But you could do still say a lot without saying too much, like what I just did here. So if I take this off the screen and do something similar. So if I kind of have like the bridge of the nose coming off here, maybe have like kind of a bulb, and I'm doing this a little bit more from the side now. Kind of bring a nostril in here. Something like that, depending on how much you might see the other side. Right now, I don't think you'd see much of the other side. Maybe I change the bridge of this nose a little. something like that. So obviously it kind of gives it a little character here. Then something like that. And obviously I feel like already we have this section of the character is a little too far forward, almost gives it more, almost like maybe a feline type look. So I almost would want to shift things a little here, make it fit a little bit better. Again, some of these things deal with preference and style. Already I feel like the eyebrows are at a better spot right there. So I came in here now and kind of got things to match a little bit more. Yeah, that's already starting to feel a little better than how I might put in eyes. See even more areas where I could probably still improve this. And I'm not even working on the one I said I was going to work on. Yeah. So sometimes I do know of artists that will come in here and they'll actually do the facial features first before they come in and start building kind of the face shape around it. Again, it kind of comes up to preference and what you you get used to doing and you prefer doing. Yeah. A little bit broader of a chin. Yeah. Well, if I actually go back to this one that I started working on, see some changes already I want to make. Sometimes I'll also come in and I like to challenge myself because right now I've been sticking pretty safe with characters, a pretty parallel angle of what they're looking. But when you really want to start changing drastic angles, so far, again, today I've only really focused on heads and faces. But start really playing around with it by making characters look really up or down. That can be a lot of fun as well. This one here, I kind of got a little looking like they're looking up a little. And that eye's a little too big. Let's make that less so big. Yeah, I think I'm worrying too much about eye shape. Let's just go ahead and go with the good old kind of circle in there for starting with. Just so that way I'm not getting too worried about it here. Get kind of the ear in here. Now, because I have them kind of looking a little downward, I think that part of my problem here is that my eyebrows are just a little too high. it's always interesting. I find it a struggle of deciding between if I want to actually like redraw something or move it, because you have the transform tool, and that is really easy, but it's also kind of lazy. And so almost a way to force yourself to get more drawing in. If you just make yourself redraw it, if it's not in the right spot, then you're kind of getting, hey, more practice time in. Yeah, I think that already is looking a little better. Something like that. Yeah, it's already looking a little better. Maybe move the nose a little down more, since we are having it be a little more of a look down. Yeah. Still was a pretty sketchier looking one, but if I wanted, I could start to come in here, clean it up. Yeah. Sometimes I'll come in here as I start wrapping up this stream here, and I will just draw different body parts, because it's fun to start to, I find fun in the learning process of learning how to draw different parts. So obviously learning how to draw heads is kind of a lot of pieces put together. I've already kind of looked at ears, nose. I drew a mouth here, but thinking about mouths in 3D is always an interesting thing as well, how they wrap around the face. But if we come in here and think about things like hands are something that people really like to say they hate to draw, because they can be difficult. When you get them right, though, they look really good. And I always like to think about what the construction of a hand, and look at like the anatomy of it and why it's doing that, and always trying to find a simplified way to do it. Let me see if I can even just test and do something. But obviously with a hand, you kind of have this kind of just shape that would be your palm, and you have kind of like this meat that is going to be where your thumb goes. And you have, of course, the four fingers, but they have a certain splay out, in that you have your middle finger is going to be the tallest, and the rest kind of fall around that. And I've seen some where they kind of do like this, where you almost surface line the wraparound for, like if it was like one big blanket, even though they're different fingers. I mean, and that's one way you could do it. Of course, there'd be a lot more to kind of come in here and do, but it helps start give you placement ideas, where to put things. But thinking about kind of like how the thumb kind of comes off here. You got your pointer, the longest one. This one needs to be a little shorter. And then, of course, your pinky. So now you kind of got this meat up here that's just under your, so you have kind of meat here. You got meat here that's for your thumb, as well as these pads here that go under your fingers. And it's interesting because that's different than it is on top. If you looked at like your palm at a side, it kind of is like this wedge. So you got the knuckles right here, and then you got this meat right here as your fingers kind of come off like that. So there's kind of like this angle to things. And then, of course, these would be where your kind of different knuckles are. If we wanted to put like the thumb here. Coming off here. Of course, very sketchy, but so it's interesting to think about how there is a difference, because almost when you look at the bottom of your hand, I think that if we just separate this into pieces like this, the digits are pretty even. Like you almost like would just separate it into thirds. Of course, there's a little bit of arcing going on there, and that's what it would look like from the bottom. But from the top, you actually have, so if we inverted this, like you were looking at the top of the hand now, from the top though, you actually have where they kind of shrink. So the digits get smaller as you go further. And that has to do with this offset where you have, your knuckles are further back than this kind of meat in your palm. That's kind of right here. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, very sketchy, but always fun to do. Well, I appreciate everyone who did join in to kind of watch this stream. I know it's just a bunch of me drawing right now. If I continue to do this, I might bring in some reference and maybe talk a little bit more about some of my experiences of drawing, as well as getting distracting from drawing. Because you know what? There are so many, you can find so many reasons not to draw, so many excuses of like, oh, you know, I got too many other chores to do. And one thing for me personally is that I enjoy drawing. And if it is something that you're doing as a profession, it's easy for you to not think about that this is your exercise. So just like a athlete who will practice hours upon, like 8 hours or more a day, just practicing his muscles and doing things to be able to do the physical exertion that they can do, that is, you know, that is their occupational expectation to do. And while for me drawing is an enjoyment, if it is also part of your profession, it is just like that. This is your exercise. If you're not doing this, then of course you're not going to get better. If you're not going out and, let's say, you know, hitting balls with a baseball bat, or trying to run that mile, or trying to swing that golf club. If you're not practicing that, of course you're not going to get better. And so this is that too. And it's real easy when it's something you really enjoy to be like, well, I can't do that because then I feel like, you know, I'm just taking away time for me to do something fun instead of doing those productive things I'm supposed to be doing. Well, guess what? If this is your profession, this is productive. And I fall into this trap a lot still myself. And I have to say this to myself. So it's really interesting how the simplest things you can come up with for why you can't draw or why you shouldn't draw, or, you know, sometimes it's more of an emotional, like, I just don't feel up to it to have to turn everything on and get started. And so, well, thank you for anyone who did jump on to kind of jump into this stream. If you are able, I would love for you to put kind of comments in the chat to kind of let me know how you thought of this, how it went, maybe the stuff that you'd rather hear me talk about or draw about. This is sort of like a test run for me. I've never done any kind of streaming like this before. I've done things in a large group, especially for different sporting events, running cameras. I've done some live directing, but never anything like this. So this has been a quite interesting thing to set up, as well as think about and start to plan. Thank you to everyone who did jump on. Again, I would love any comments you have for if I was to continue to do this, what kind of things you would rather see, or things you did enjoy, what could be worked on. I would really appreciate that. I see some things kind of coming in the chat. Unfortunately, I don't know if they'll pop up in our little thing. There's a few popping up there, but I think they're old ones. But again, I really appreciate everyone jumping on, and hopefully, if there was anything out of this, you did glean something, either appreciation for drawing, maybe appreciation for coming in and later at life to still try to continue working on your drawing when it's something that you let go. Everyone has those little regrets, and hopefully I can help to say don't let it be a regret any further. You can always pivot and start to refocus on that thing. There's nothing stopping you but yourself at many times. So again, thanks everyone, and hopefully you'll catch me another time. Take care.